this advice might sound a little bit contradictory, but I think if you have writing or poetry goals that involve publishing, that involve getting into different programs or winning awards and things like that, then I think that it may be worth spending a little bit less time on the craft and the writing aspect and more on the relationship development aspect of your work. That's what I'm going to talk about.
Oh yeah.
All right. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, guys. Welcome to your weekly, tied up to my other job, weekly poetry talk show. This is
Yeah.
Diverses Live. My name is Jeff,
I'm Matthias.
and today we're going to be talking about the importance of really trying to develop relationships with poets and other people in the field in order to achieve your writing goals. And I don't know about you, Matthias, but I can speak to my own journey. There was a time in my writing where I thought the quality of the writing itself was going to be the thing that would lead to all opportunities.
Yeah. I think that's one of the things that's especially when we're talking about like opportunities when it comes to residencies or maybe like positions in other spaces. It's really hard because it's like the only thing that you coming up as an artist you're really taught is to really focus on the craft, focus on the work, and these are things that are, I think, at the top of the list when it comes to like the things that you're gonna need. Like you just want to make sure you're upholding quality and like craft, but ultimately one of like an element that you really can't do without is community and network. So I mean, yeah, those are really important things to talk about.
Why do you think there's so much attention paid to craft? Why are a lot of poets starting off with that emphasis, do you think?
Well, ultimately, I think it's the most important because
Mm-hmm.
like if you are the leader or the head of an institution and you're thinking of having a poet place in a space, and again, especially depending on how esteemed that institution is, then you're gonna want whatever poet that you have filling this position to really be adequate and well fitted with the craft.
Mm-hmm.
And I also think that craft is a funnel for poetry, regardless of whether or not you are planning to do other things with it. Right? So even if you're not somebody who's like, well, I want to be this really large poet somewhere, working on craft, like that's still fulfilling. Like in the same way that I would imagine like working on equations is fulfilling for like mathematicians and stuff like that, or accountants. I don't know who works on equations just regularly, just because. Shout out to you if you are doing that because great stuff. But yeah, but no, I just think that yeah, I think craft is not unimportant,
Mm-hmm.
and it should not be. It shouldn't be the case that it's not emphasized. But yeah, I think that ultimately people are emphasizing craft because they are the people that are in the positions, right? So they're just like, yeah,
Mm.
work on the craft, work on the craft, work on the craft, because it's like, the people that are in the positions already are in the place, and like the reasons why they're probably in those spaces is because they are advocates for the craft, but they also did the
Mm.
other thing, the whole networking thing, in order to get them into position. So it's kind of a mix of different reasons,
Mm-hmm.
but I mean, again, it's just to say that I don't think craft is something that shouldn't be emphasized. It
Mm-hmm.
shouldn't be emphasized. I would say more than the networking thing or less. It's just a matter of like how you're positioned.
Mm. I think it's when it comes to like the networking aspect, I think craft is it's the assumption and the prerequisite. Like I think the assumption is that you already are producing work of a standard that someone is looking for.
Okay.
Now, I do think that when it comes to things like quality, we're not necessarily, unless we're writing for ourselves, we're not the ones who are the ultimate kind of judges of quality because
Sure.
different people are looking for different things. There's plenty of poets that, and I think this is true for like art and things like that. It's easy to be like, to see someone's work and be like, oh, my work is of a higher standard or of a lower standard than that. But
Mm-hmm.
that's your own take on it, you
Yeah.
know? It's an interesting parallels, like for instance, if you look at like Harry Potter, like Harry Potter is a book that's beloved by a lot of people, but it's also a book that has one of the highest numbers of like 1 star ratings
I thought
in
I was gonna
addition
say
to like five
Harry
star.
Potter was great at networking. He had an
You know,
entire group that underneath him.
so and the thing about those ratings, this is something that Seth Godin speaks a lot to, is that the people who gave the 5 star ratings are right, and the people who give the 1 star ratings are right, because these are your own individual perspectives. So I think one of the tricky things with craft is necessary. Like I mentioned earlier, it's an assumption, but at the same time, there's also that kind of quality element that is outside of your control and is determined by the person that you're revealing the work to,
I agree.
if they're your target audience.
Yeah, I agree. I also think there's something relevant to, like, because when we're talking about quality, I think the thing that is discussed the most is whether or not somebody thinks something is good or bad, and I don't think that that is even for a really large part of an artist's journey, that's not even the area that they're participating in. The area that you should be participating in is like, would somebody want to read it? Because there's people, again, just like with Harry Potter, like, with J.K. Rowling, it's like somebody has to be invested in picking this book up, and a lot of times they're reading half, if not the entire book, and then making a decision, and they might come to like a decision where like, oh, it's not great or it's amazing, but they're coming to that decision at some point in their journey with the material. And I think that we, a lot of times as artists, like, we're always focused on, like, we're just assuming somebody picks up my work and they're reading it, and I'm like, J.K. Rowling had to get to the point where somebody's saying, I'm picking up your work, and like, that's it. So now you just have to kind of figure out, okay, how do I get to that area or kind of get to that space? Which, just to say that when it comes to quality, like, there's a much worse like paradigm when it comes to quality than somebody thinking it's bad. uh, which is somebody just thinking, I'm not interested enough to even want to pick this thing up, and a lot of that will go to craft, but a great deal of that is, either the connections or how you've been able to place your work in order to give it the best, visibility or the best opportunity.
I like that you phrase like where to place your work, because this is the thing, is that I think that for many people, I think the thing that's holding back their work right now isn't their work. I think that it's the inability to find the place for their work, which to me is not an issue of the quality of the work. It's an issue of the amount of quality relationships that have been developed with other people.
Okay. Like, can you go into that? I guess the quality relationships with other people. Can you kind of maybe go into that a little bit deeper, as far as like, who are the other people that we're attempting to develop those
Yeah,
quality
I
relationships?
think, I think we are looking for people that are going to. I'm not talking about quality of relationships in terms of like, oh, this is like a person, even necessarily that like. I don't think it has to do with like respect or even necessarily depth of the relationship, but quality in the sense of, this is a person that's going to talk about my work even when I'm not in the room. Like, I
Yeah,
think the more people we have that are talking about the things we're doing, even when we're not present, is going to determine how far our work is going to spread.
for sure.
I think you see that, for instance, I think we talked about before, like Hanif is probably the easiest example right now. Hanif, if you haven't heard, he's a Columbus based. Hanif will probably call himself a poet, but I feel like he's essayist, memoirist.
He's
He's does a lot of kind of nonfiction type writing. Although I know he's particular to poetry. Who has a book? He had a book. Was the third major book outside of poetry that came out. I think third, fourth.
Fourth, I think.
But it's for I don't. I'm thinking like outside. So he has a book that came out.
It's like four. Maybe it's five. It might be five. Four.
But two of them were like poetry, like strict poetry. Anyways, okay. Anyway, he had a book that came out, and people are talking about him, right?
Yeah.
Like, but who are the people that are talking about? This is where things get interesting because GQ is talking about him. You know, like the New York Times is talking about him. The Wall Street Journal is talking about him. Vogue is talking. So it's like it's a literary book, but the conversations are extending beyond it. That he's not even in that room for. It's like social media posts, like people on Instagram taking pictures of his book without him even asking for it.
Yeah.
You know? And it's like you want to know how to get a book to spread. That's what needs to happen. How many people are talking about what you're doing besides yourself?
Yeah.
Because if you're the only one talking about yourself in the work that you're doing, then that's a sign that we are not at that level of reaching maximum impact.
You should be the first person.
You need to, yeah, for sure. You need to show up for yourself as well. But if you're the only one showing up for your work, then it's going to be very hard to, really to get your work in front of as many people as you may want.
For sure.
This is just a quick. This is not a conversation that if you write for yourself, this is not your conversation. To just to make that clear, because there's a lot of
I just love to write. It's just
my writing's for me. It's just for me.
Like, hey, go ahead and log off.
Yeah. This is
don't
a
log
conversation
off.
for you.
Just stay here.
Okay.
But
this is for people who are writing and they're like, I want people to read my work.
Yeah. Not like and I think reading your work is fundamental, but it's also like I think that there's a bridge between like somebody like reading your work and then wanting to participate with the work further, which I think kind of creates that like lasting relationship that we're talking about, where it's like it's not just I listen to you, but it's like, okay, what do I do? Can I do other things with this work, which is kind of brings it out further.
I like that what I do, because I think one of the things, going back to Hanif's thing, Hanif's book has entered enough of the social conscious where what do I get when I read Hanif's book if I'm these magazines and things like that? It gives me like clout to a degree. I think there's like a status association, because it's like, I'm a literary person. Look at me. I read this book by this well-known modern contemporary author. I think that there's other things I get too. I might get entertainment from it. I might get other things, but I think there are people out there that it's important for them as their own kind of self-identity to be like, I am someone who is literary. I am someone who stays up to date with like the trends, like the literary trends. How do I do that? If I read Hanif's book, I'm able to achieve those aspects.
For sure.
And again, there's also the entertainment aspect, and there's also the aspect that, I literally enjoy Hanif's work. You know what I mean? I think it's a mix of all these things kind of coming together, because I think if it's just like purely one thing, it might be more difficult to spread. But if you're able to kind of actually get into have work that resonates with people's psyches and desires, the more you're able to do that, then the more we're able to get work out.
Yeah, and I think it has something to do with like kind of naturally the lineage of his work as well. So it's like the effect that Hanif's work is able to have on just either social conscious to the degree that it is, and then naturally the the fact or the anticipation of him dropping a book or having a book that's about to release or having a book that's just released. In order to get to that space, you have to have kind of like a build up. So this is not necessarily to say that, you know, you have to be like, man, how do I get GQ to be talking about my book right now? As much as it's like, you know, how do I establish relationships, or maybe how do I establish my work in a way that maybe, you know, a couple books, 5-6 books from now, I might be elevating my status so that you can have that kind of, because it's like everything that's happening, I would say like now is like it's an elevation, but it's not like a deviation from like, it's an elevation, not a deviation from where, you know, not like, you know, when he was, I mean, by the time I came onto the poetry scene myself, Hanif was already Hanif, right? But, you know, there's been other poets, other artists that I've been able to really see kind of gain that popularity through, you know, naturally the magnetism of their work. And the thing is like it's not changing their paradigm. It's really just elevating their paradigm. So maybe now you have just like maybe just everybody around you in your circle, they're talking about your work. They're talking about like that new book. Like let's bring it down to like even like just your local open mic, right? So you create work that people want to talk about, that people enjoy, and these people are like, oh man, like that the new Jeff poem is out, like that's really really dope, and then they're talking about it amongst each other. And now maybe Jeff publishes a poem somewhere, or Jeff maybe is talking about a book, and you have to, I think, you know, and correct me if I'm wrong, like you have to kind of talk about your book or try to have an intentional rollout that's not just, you know, last week you just met Jeff and he wasn't talking anything about a book coming out. He wasn't talking anything about wanting to put together a collection or anything like that. And then this week he just has 20 books for you to buy. You know what I mean? Like you like try to have some kind of intentionality behind like a rollout so that you're the one that's creating the flatbed for the esteem that you want later on to be happening.
Is it so? On theme, one of the things that we did over the weekend, we hosted a poet networking event. This is, I mean, maybe other places are doing stuff like this.
Networking event. Yeah, you heard the clap it up.
We added some things to the stream deck. And I've never taken part in a poet networking event. I've never even heard of a poet.
Never heard of a poet before?
Aside from like an open mic, you know.
I've never heard of poets. I just this is the first time.
Thank you. These are very meaningful contributions. Here are a couple of pictures from. Just like look at us.
Look at
some things like
look at that.
We had a good time. And one of the things that I talked about towards the end of it was the fact that I think a lot of poets, artists, writers, I think a lot of times we're operating kind of like lizard brain, day to day, kind of like survival mode. Just like, okay, like I'm thinking about my work from a 24-hour, 72-hour like vision.
Yeah.
You know, versus I think if you look at a lot of people who are successful, however you want to determine what success means in different industries, I think a lot of times you're not seeing day-to-day mode. You're seeing 1-year vision, you're seeing 3-year vision, you're seeing 5-year vision, you know, to the point where, you know, you look at the heads of a lot of like major like corporations and things like that, people are thinking decades. You look at like Columbus just, they're doing a lot of highway construction, and then you look at the timeline, they're not thinking 2025, 2020, they're thinking like, oh, 2035.
Yeah.
This is our 2050 Look at like Saudi Arabia. They're building the city called like the Lime, like Neom. The vision is 2050. You know what I mean? Like we're thinking big picture. You know, and I'm not saying, hey, I need you to have like a 40-year plan, but I'm like, you know, maybe taking a moment to think, this is my 1-year direction. This is my 3-year, and this is my 5-year, and it doesn't need to be like super concrete necessarily, although I will say that if you're building towards something, I think ironically poets tend to struggle with vision it's a lot kind of aimless. We're kind of good, like a lot of times just like poem by poem versus like like taking a moment to like when you close your eyes and you like ask yourself, okay, this is where I want to be with my writing, 1 year from now or 5 years from now. What do you actually see? Like, do you actually see yourself on stage, like holding like an MFA degree? Do you see yourself in front of like a lecture hall? Like, do you see yourself with like two poetry collections, just like double fisting books? Like, what do you see? Because the clearer you are on the vision, you can reverse engineer that. You be like, okay,
Yeah.
so if I'm holding this degree, then that means I went to a school. So if I went to a school, that means I had to submit an application, and so if I submit an application, then I had to do, so you can kind of start building on the steps,
Yeah.
right?
And I think like you got to think about it how like like an architect might think about like building a building, right? And I know you brought up a couple examples before, but if you're just like, I want a building here, like that might get you, to the point where you're like, man, I want to start working on how to lay some plans. But if somebody comes to you and says like, hey, these are the plans for the building that's going to be right there, then you're looking at the skeleton. So you might have the plans for the building that's going to be right there. You might not have the kind of microwave that is going to be in the break room, but so you might not have like these like ultra specifics. But I think a lot of times, and I suffer from it too, right? So I think there's a lot of spaces where I'm like, man, I really want a chapbook. And I think the thing is, because you're thinking, I really want a chapbook. A lot of times what you'll do, and this will, again, this is where quality suffers, because quality, I don't think for a lot of people, it doesn't suffer from lack of effort. It suffers from the fact that you had the idea right now and you thought that you needed to have it realized next week. You know what I mean? And like, maybe if you want to create a chapbook, you can have a chapbook. If you have enough poems, you can have the chapbook out next week. But what kind of quality is that going to be? You're excited to have a project created and excited to have a project done. And I'm not even saying that that's like, that's bad depending on the purposes. But if you're like, man, this is going to be part of my, of my catalog. So if somebody goes through all of my work, if they go through my entire canon, this is a fundamental, piece that they're going to come across, that they're going to understand. This is his first work. This is his second work. This is his third work. And so if you're thinking about that, and you're thinking about, where you want to be, like you want to be 10 years from now, you want to be somebody who has 15 books. I don't know. And that can be whatever, depending on your goal, like that can be whatever. If you're thinking about it like that, then right now the thing that you should be thinking about is like maybe how to tell those 15 books apart, right? So like, what is each book like that? And then you like, once you have that question, like, how do I tell my books apart? And then you say like, what is each book about? And now when you're writing and when you're creating, you can be like, well, I'm going to put this in bin A. I'm going to put this in bin B because these are things that are helping me. And then, little by little, you have a fully realized vision, or you have something that's much more realized than what you had before. But yeah, I think the thing that is a production killer, and really it's just the quality killer, is just the fact that we have one idea, and we're kind of a lot of us artists are like kind of scatterbrained. So like, we have one idea, and we're just like, we need to bull rush this idea because we just saw somebody else have a chapbook and that went great. Man, I really want to write this chapbook. Let me just take all the ideas that I have and let me just throw them into this thing, and now it's a chapbook, and hopefully it's the quality that I want it to be, and very seldom is it.
I agree with what you said. You mentioned a lot about projects involving, like, for instance, creating chapbook. I think another thing that is tied to this is, I think, I see this a lot with poetry. It's like, I'm going to make this collection. I'm going to make this collection. Everything's about the collection. You publish the collection. But one of the things we haven't done, I think we need to be honest about why are we publishing a collection. I think a lot of people publish a book with a hope that people are going to buy the book. Do you think that's fair? If I publish a book it may not necessarily be the primary goal. The primary goal might be like, I want to, like, it's kind of like the trophy. Like, I have the book. Look at me. I have a book. But I think also, if we're publishing it in general, I think one of the goals you may have is trying to sell the book and get the book out. But the thing is, as the River Six of us talking about the microwave in the break room, in the foundation. I appreciate that. When you were talking about that. So you make the book, but as soon as we start thinking sales and people buying something that we've created, we've now entered a very different discussion. Because why do people buy things? People aren't buying your thing just because you made it. People are buying. Often, people buy things for themselves. In general, you buy something because it solves something, some sort of pain point that you have. Pain points come in so many different varieties, right? It can be entertainment can be a pain point. That's what Netflix and things like that are big on. We're going to solve what you need to do at night when you don't know what else to do. It can be like health. It can be like shelter. Like it could be like security. So I think that poems. I think we're in a lag spike. We'll give it a second. There we go. Okay. So, talking about pain points again. Sorry, we're just about to spike. So, I mentioned this earlier with Hanif. I think one of the things that Hanif's collection, one of the pain points that I think it solves is things related to status in the literary community. Because I think it makes people feel like it makes them feel educated. That's an advantage I get. I read your book. I feel more in touch with the literary community and things like that. So, when we publish a book, I think a lot of times there's almost like this selfishness that's like, this book, I made this book for me, and now I'm going to sell it because that's what you do with books, right? What else do you do with a book? And so, but I think that's kind of going about it the wrong way, because we're not taking the time to think about, I've made this book. How is this book solving an issue for somebody?
Right.
An issue doesn't have to be like heavy, like, oh my gosh, like my life's falling apart. Like, it doesn't have to be that. It can be minor, but it's still, what's the solution that your book is giving to people? And I think this is part of the reason why so many poetry books are selling like 100 copies or fewer, is because we don't know how we are contributing to people's lives.
That's fair. I think about it even in the scope of like when we're talking about Hanif's book. I think that because I think what you get from I think the thing that the reason that he can have the effect of like an esteem attached to having read his book,
Esteem's a good word, yeah,
is because the book is already going really deep on the really kind of like the ultra human level of the experience of reading the book. And so it's essentially like it's kind of hard to describe. It's just like it's an experience that you understand, like, man, this is a really deep visceral experience, something that I'm really enjoying, something that gives me something unique that another poet is not giving me. You know what I mean?
That's which is again solving a problem again.
Right. Well, and because he's done that enough on a consistent basis, it's like, it's kind of the same as like, this new this person's album. Have you listened to it? Like, oh, it's an adventure. Like, you're gonna love this experience. And so which is just say that I agree with you in that respect, but I think like the primary thing that it's giving you is something that it's giving you on a human level that creates the esteem of somebody having experienced it. If that makes sense.
I think we're thinking different ends of the pipeline. I'm thinking about I think that especially speaks to the people closest to Hanif and already familiar with Hanif's work. Like I think like the audience he's kind of built just through exposure and over time, and we're familiar with what he's doing, and be like, yo, I know this experience and he's going to deliver on, you know?
Right.
But I think there's also people that have, for instance, read this recent book that haven't read anything else by him because of the fact that they see people. I think you saw a lot with like
Right,
Harry Potter.
yeah.
You know, like people reading Harry Potter. It's like everyone's reading Harry Potter. I need to read Harry Potter. You know, like I think that can also. There's so many. You know, everyone has different.
I'll give
There's always
that,
going to
yeah.
be multiple motives and things like that. You know, and I think the more conversations that you're involved in those cycles, that the more you do this, so like it's creating deeper and deeper ripples, right? You know, and the more your work is kind of touching on that, the greater resonance I think it can have. All of this discussion to say that I think one way that we can start to really have a greater understanding of the pain point that our own work is solving, and to greater understand the impact that our work can have on the larger world is by strengthening our relationships with others. You know, I think let's use Hanif now as an example. Who are all the people that Hanif knows now? You know,
I mean, there's a lot of
it's he knows a lot of people.
He just posted about his conversation with Andre 3000.
I saw that. You know, I haven't had a conversation with Andre. Have you had a conversation?
Not yet.
Not. I
not
like
yet.
the yeah. Yeah. Let's, you know, again, put it in the vision, right? We can aim for that. So you know, there's, I think something you see with, you can look at artists like your famous artists versus like artists who, you know, are just kind of local heroes but never seem to break out their own neighborhoods versus your own maybe people are just always in the studio but outside the studio no one knows, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
a lot of times it comes down to how many people you know.
Yeah, that's true.
You know what they're doing, like it's I forget the exact wording, but there's this idea that you know, wealth is tied to impact. The more impact you have, the greater your wealth. And there's so many ways you can measure wealth, right?
Right.
You can do it financially, but it can be in terms of like if you're a church, it could be the size of your congregation. You know, if you're an artist, it could be, you know, how many calls you're getting for like, you know, solicitations and things like that, you know, or commissions. You know, however you want to determine it, you know. And I think the reality is that for a lot of poets, the impact that we have is too small because our network is too small. And so we're not able to, you know, craft aside. We could have the greatest craft in the world, but you know, if we're not able to reach that many people, you know, if the audience is again is 5 people, doesn't really, at the end of the day, your craft isn't going to be enough to, craft alone isn't going to be enough to do that. So I think it's really time we need to think about how do we expand our networks? How do we get to strengthen and develop and create new relationships with more people?
Yeah. Yeah, and that's I think that's a really beneficial kind of note for a lot of poets. And I'll say this because I think that when it comes to an open mic, whenever I talk to people about open mic, whenever I talk to poets who have never, like people that I know in like either not even necessarily in the poetry community, because there are people that I'll meet and it might be at an event or maybe at a completely not connected event, or just like artists in general, and they're like, I'm a poet, I have this book that I'm working on and I really want to get my book out, and they're like, but I've never been to an open mic, I've never performed on an open mic. Mm-hmm. And I think that because the thing that they're thinking about is the only aspect of the open mic that they're thinking about is the literal performance on the open mic, which I can't say enough. There is absolute merit to that, absolutely. So the next part that I'm saying is not to take merit away from the fact that I think it's good to get out there on the open mic. I kind of look at it like testing material. Like if you're a comedian out there, like, you know, in order to, you might think your stuff is hilarious, but if you get on stage and you're trying to perform it and then the audience is not reactive, now maybe it's how you're performing it, or maybe you can use some tightening up in some spaces. And the to me, the best place to test that is a captive audience that does not know you, that doesn't have any investment, and just being like, I'm your friend. I'm, you know, me and you are great already, or what have you. And so, yeah, which is just to say, like, performing at open mics and being in open mic spaces, I think carries some real benefit. Outside of that, though, after the open mic, you know, you're around just a ton of poets, and you're around a ton of poets who have an investment in, they want to be better, and and a lot of them want to be in community with people that they, you know, hold in some high esteem. And what what do you think kind of gets you esteem in those places, or gets like a measure of esteem, like kind of in real time? It's somebody performing a poem that you're like takes your breath away, that you're like, man, or even maybe doesn't even take your breath away, but there's one line, there's one part of the poem in there that you're like, man, that's interesting, and that's a conversation starter with another poet that's in your community. And that's something that, you know, I vividly remember. There's several open mics shows that like we would go to regularly, but there's several poets that, you know, I would hear a portion of their work, and I would be like, that is really incredible. Like, I want to talk to them about that kind of aspect of your work. And you continue to build just those relationships. I've heard about shows from poets at those shows, and then I would go to those shows. And so, yeah, that's a incredibly valuable aspect of the work, and it's incredibly valuable, like, kind of aspect of just community, because you know, yeah, again, performing I think is good for you. You know, especially if you're not somebody who, if you've never performed before, get out there and perform.
Yeah.
Like, I know it might feel like a lot, but I'm like, man, your writing will actually get a lot better once you are able to get some pretty immediate feedback, open mic wise. And you know, there's other ways to get your writing better, but open mic is kind of a cool one. But yeah, like, again, ultimately, that after action, what you do after the open mic, you know, the kind of relationship that you're able to that you're able to create and cultivate, there are really, really important and really, really valuable. And those are the things that are like, yeah, like that networking opportunity, like that could carry your work from just being, you know, hopefully everybody in here heard me and saw the work, but now somebody that's in the community has a grasp of you as an artist and might want to bring you in somewhere else.
I think it's tricky with open mics because I think it's just tricky with poets and just writers, because I think a lot of times there's a selfishness that comes into it. You can see it in the open mics where the poet waits to perform, they perform their poem, and then they leave.
Yeah.
We've all seen that. There's this sense of the focus on individual work, and this isn't to say that all writers are like this, but it's just a lot like, I think there's a difference between, you know, seeing an open mic as an opportunity to practice work and see audience involvement, and performing a poem to purely get attention.
Yeah.
I think the long-term play, I think in some ways attending open mics and having those interactions afterwards may actually be more valuable than the time you actually spend on stage, especially if you approach it with a lot of intentionality with the relationships and things like that, like really trying to interact, help, build, praise, you know, learn. I think there's a lot of opportunities you can get from those,
Yeah.
you know, 10-minute, 15-minute 20-minute conversations you have after a show. And I think sometimes that might be a good talk, like open mic strategies, like to strengthen your poetry. Like I think like ways to kind of navigate those relationships, because I think sometimes people don't know what to do. They're like, all right, I saw people perform. Now what do I say? What do I talk about? I think sometimes we can overthink things. So like strategies for kind of handling those sorts of conversations after a show, because I think they can be really meaningful.
Yeah, I also think people can underthink like a scenario or a situation. Man, there's been so many. Uh, okay, and I used to be. I think kind of depending on the day, I can be really like withdrawn and kind of like, okay, I just want to like get my poem done, and it's really hard for me to kind of like maybe put together some of the communication skills and networking skills unless I'm like really really comfortable with somebody already. And I'm kind of learning the the networking kind of thing. But it was after I performed for it was a gig that I performed for actually, and so I performed there, and then as I was performing, a gentleman, like after, like immediately after the poem, a gentleman, like he was just like, "Hey, that was beautiful. Before you leave, like don't let us not talk to each other before you leave." And that like and so I was in the space, and like everybody's like after the event is wrapped up, everybody's just kind of going around talking, and I go up to him and was like, I introduce myself. I'm like, hi, thank you so much for your kind words. That was great. And that conversation led to, I had like 6 gigs, that like, and they were at the time, at least one of those gigs was the highest paying gig I had ever gotten. And then I had a couple gigs after that, like throughout the course of that time, which were still some pretty high, some good paying gigs. Which is just to say that and again, that's not to say like you're gonna get off the open mic one day and you're gonna just be like, oh, here's $10,000, but it's just to say that like I think you can really undervalue kind of the space that you're in. What's so interesting? I think that like imagine somebody who went to open mics and was always telling themselves, or let's say somebody that knew about all the open mics in the city but just never went, and was telling themselves, okay, I really want to get my poetry career started, and I'll get started like next month. I'm going to get it started. I'm going to be in the community. I'm going to like kind of present my book and stuff like that, and that's going to be the way that I sell my book and whatever the situation is. And then like that happens right before March 2020, right? And like everything kind of shuts down, and you kind of that ability to be able to be person to person networking kind of goes away for at least a while. And I think that is an incredibly valuable resource, and it's a valuable resource, and it's so valuable that once people were able to really do person to person, like kind of communicating, like you saw people like not only gigs, but you just saw a kind of a completely different kind of community, I think, in Columbus, because of the fact that we didn't really have a poetry community that was like, or didn't have a whole bunch of these smaller poetry communities. I think you had people that just didn't really know, they didn't know any better. Yeah. And so they didn't know, oh, this is this crowd, this is this crowd, this is this crowd. You just had people that were going to shows that they enjoyed. And I think it's kind of distilling a little bit more now, but it's just to say that, take advantage of these spaces while you have them, and don't assume that you can just do it next month, that you can just do it next year, that you can, you know what I mean? Like if there's something actionable that you can do now, that I'm not, maybe I wouldn't tell you to have your entire full length done by next week, because like that, and if you haven't written anything, but creating a community, like there's a lot of those people that you really want to meet. And again, a lot of it, I would say like, I wouldn't, and you might disagree. So like, this might be just a different opinion. I think kind of going into those situations, understanding that those connections are things that I think they build you up as just an artist. You know what I mean? I think man, being in community with people that I admire and whose work I admire, and I can pick their brain about the work that they enjoy and about just general things that they enjoy as well. I think it can be really really beneficial and really make you feel at home in the artist space. And so I wouldn't say like, oh, go into those, like have a conversation with there's a poet in our community, really great person, Cynthia Moa. Like Cynthia, like I wouldn't say jump over there and have a conversation with Cynthia Moa thinking that this conversation is what's going to help you sell your book in a year. Like really go into that conversation maybe genuinely and really understanding that this is somebody in our community that's doing it. This is somebody's community that's a really great writer, and understanding that like those are the things you want to pull like from that situation and from that space. And then understanding that those are like anything that you get from that space will only make the prospects that you have coming up that much better.
I think some of what you're mentioning has to do a lot with risk taking, and poets not necessarily always taking risk. I mean, you can't get the maximum benefit if you don't take the maximum risk. A lot of time, we have to do more of what feels uncomfortable to us. So it's like,
Yeah.
If you're making excuses about not going to a show or something like that, one of my favorite quotes is, you find what you are looking for. So if you're like, I can't go to this show because I don't have time, you're right. You don't have time. You are looking for all the reasons to not have time, and you don't have time, so you cannot go to that show. I agree with you 100%. But if you're like, no, you know what, I'm really tired, I'm really busy, but I'm going to go to this show. Like, it's not even a discussion. I agree with you. You know what? You have all the things in place. You're going to find a way to go to the show, and you'll end up at the show. Like, you find what you are looking for. So, like, I think approaching things with that mindset has been really helpful for me. I think that if you notice that, oh wow, this thing makes me the thought of doing this thing that I know would benefit me makes me really uncomfortable. I'm not saying that, like risk your like health or like safety or things like that, but a lot of times we need to embrace the things that feel the least comfortable to us in order to move to the next step. That's our body's way of telling us that we're about to grow, in my opinion. And I think that, for instance, I can say for events, like if I'm hosting events, one of the things maybe you guys organize events, and maybe you've tried creating like event pages on social media, and you may realize that, oh wow, it's really hard to get people to sign up for an event online because the algorithm may not show it to people, or other things, right? So what do? Well, if you make an event and you really are, interested in making it successful, especially like if it's like a one-time event, it's wild. Like the percentage, I'll use an example. Like for an event on Eventbrite, I might have 20 people sign up for an event on Eventbrite. How many people will actually show?
10.
Less than that. Like I would say if I see like 20 people signing up on Eventbrite, I'm expecting probably 3 to 4 of them, in all honesty. Now I will say that this is often for free events on Eventbrite. Okay. So when it's paid, when there's money, when there's some stakes involved, you get some skin in the game. Yeah. But like if you're organizing like a free event, for instance, on Eventbrite, 20 people show up. In general, what I've seen is it tends to be between about 3 to 5 people, if that. Okay. I can tell you, for instance, like when we tried doing a morning open mic, and for that we had probably about 20 to 25 people show up on Eventbrite. Yeah, well, it was 3 people.
Oh,
Okay,
man.
that said, like, yeah, I found you on Eventbrite. Conversely, we did the poet networking thing, which I didn't really. We had an Eventbrite page, but I didn't really market it. The people who showed up for the poet networking thing, honestly, were largely people I actually directly DM'd. We had an event page on Facebook and Eventbrite and things like that, and we were posting on the socials, but the people who actually showed up are the people I actually, directly messaged. Say, hey, we're doing this thing. It's free. We have food and stuff like that. And then we were also expecting like an additional, like, probably about 4 people, but They had last minute cancellations things, which happens, you know. So initially though, I didn't really with events like it can be uncomfortable. Like I don't want to like direct. I don't want to like bother
Yeah.
people, you know. But you do it, you know. And I asked them like, hey, like if you don't want me to message you, just let me know. But everyone's like, no, keep messaging me about events and stuff like that, you know. So like the thing that initially may make you uncomfortable is also the thing that might be the catalyst for your growth, you know.
Yeah. And that's all. I mean, I think we have like aspirations that are connected to like people that we see out there doing it, and I think a lot of times we're thinking those people aren't doing the things that we have to do right now.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like you don't know how that person might have started somewhere much different, and they had to the way that they had to navigate might have looked a lot different. But also I would say if pride is the thing that is stopping you from, you know, like if somebody told you right now, like, okay, listen, two people are going to come to your event next week. If all you do is post on Instagram, post on Facebook, post on Threads, post on Twitter. If you do that, and if you do 10 posts a day on each platform, two people are going to come to your event. But if you message 15 people a day with just maybe a general message, hey, this is my event, I would love to see you there, this is the event page, something kind of general. You don't even have to be super specific, just something general out to 15 people a day. And I'm like, if you do that, then 6 people are going to come. Now if you're like, that seems too interpersonal, then I'm like, then maybe the thing that you're looking to do is not really what you want to do, because the thing that you're thinking is like, man, I don't really want to go that far. I don't really want to do something like that. But I'm like, as long as you're keeping it tasteful, don't like do anything crazy or don't hassle people. But if you're just reaching out to them, just, showing that you want them to come, something that's weird. Effort is looked at like super weird, I think, in the poetry community, like just artist communities in general, because everybody wants to kind of give off the esteem that either their event is just this thing that everybody wants to do just by default, so all they should have to do is say it, or their poems or their work or what have you. There is a comedian and content creator. His name is Kev on Stage. Have you ever heard of Kev on Stage? So he actually had this, and this was maybe a month ago, maybe less than a month ago. He had this post that kind of punched me right in the chest, like as far as like not literally, but like figuratively punched me right in the chest with like just this thought. He was like, there's somebody that is in your network that's around you, that is not as good as you, that's doing better than you and is further in their career than you, just because they're putting themselves out there. And I'm like, and it's a crazy notion, because he's trying to be as clear with you as possible. Putting yourself out there is not easy. Putting yourself out there is not something that everybody is willing to do. Like really putting yourself out there on the limb, like, I'm trying. Like, listen, guys, I'm trying. I really want this. It sounds, I think people take it and they think like it sounds like desperate, but you don't want to necessarily come off as desperate, right? But I think to the people that don't try things, that don't put themselves out there, that don't exert themselves, like somebody saying, hey, I want you to come to my show, I want you to experience my show, I want you to be in this space, I want your art to be in this space with this other art performing on stage, like that sounds desperate, when it's really not. It's really just somebody who's really trying. Somebody who's really extending some effort. And I think if you actually extend the effort, then people gravitate towards that. I think in the same way that I think about like athletes, like an athlete at the top of their profession, at the top of their field, is almost like the definition of somebody who is a tryhard. right? They're the definition of somebody who like you don't look up to the people that are like, yeah, my motto is, I go out there and if I make some baskets, great. If I
Practice? You
don't
want to
make
talk practice?
if I make some baskets, great. If I don't know, like all the greats, all the people that you're like, man, I have their poster, I have, their jersey, I have their shoes. All those people are all people who are like, I was in the gym before the other guys got in there. I was in the gym after they left. I pushed myself. I tried to encourage my teammates. I encouraged myself. If we lost the game, it was on me. So like if you have a small amount of people coming, don't make it like, well, these people just didn't know poetry. They didn't like poetry. Like, no, what could I have done? What can I do to get two more people? What can I do to get five more people?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, that reminds me of like the Kobe Bryant quote. Like I forget who was talking about. Like some player had gone like 0 for 8 in the first half, and then
It's not what we were just talking
yeah,
about.
that's what you're talking about. And like, and then like what Kobe's like, if I were him, I would have gone like 0 for 30. Because you don't stop, you keep going. And it also reminds me too about I forget who said so many quotes. I forget where they originated from. I'm sorry. If you know, please let me know. This idea that like an amateur is a person who practices something until they get it right, whereas like a professional is someone that practices until they can't get it wrong.
Yeah.
And it's like keep continuously like pushing yourself, whether it's events or whether it's like with the craft. And I think this goes back to the idea of a book, like, and the idea that if you have a book that you think, to go back to our earlier point, is solving a pain point in someone's life, like, think this way, like if you were a doctor and you had the solution to someone's pain, in my opinion, you have an obligation to help people. You have an obligation to help your patient. If you know the solution to their pain, your job is to deliver that.
Right.
With your work, if you have that much confidence in your work where you're like, you know what, this work really contributes to people's lives in a meaningful way, well then, to not do the work to get your work in front of people is at best a disservice, and at worst maybe even selfish, because you're not putting in the energy to do the thing that your work could give to the world.
Yeah, I also think there's something like, I think there's like levels to belief, you know what I mean? Or like, or there's differences in like belief, right? So, somebody says like, I think my work is great and I think I really want to get my work out to as many people as possible. And then you ask them like, okay, so what did you do today to make that happen? What did you do yesterday to make that happen? A lot of times they're like, well, I don't really know. Nothing really. It was but I'm like, okay, let's say this. Let's say right now today, you parked 3 blocks of this building, right? And because you parked 3 blocks away from this building, you know that you have to walk 10-15 minutes to get to your car. And let's say you looked on the weather report and the weather report said in 3 minutes it's absolutely going to be a thunderstorm rain shower, right? And there's an umbrella that's, maybe 2 stories up with some steps. Now, belief in that case is like this a tangible thing, right? Because it's like, if I believe what this news reporter is saying, then I'm going to get the umbrella. But if I'm like, I don't really believe this news reporter, then maybe you don't get the umbrella. Maybe you're like, it's not really worth going up them steps to get the umbrella and then doing all that other stuff. But I'm like, no, but if you absolutely believe it, if you're like, I believe this thing for sure, then you're going to do the requisite work in order to protect yourself from the thunderstorm. And I think it's kind of like something that's comparative to the situation with a lot of poets where They maybe are saying things that they have heard other poets say, and so like they think that's the thing that you're supposed to say. I know we had well, I mean, it myself included. And I don't want to say like I'm not like a fan of like hosting an open mic, but I used to think that like hosting an open mic is like, and I've hosted like a few, right? And I enjoyed it, but I don't think that that was like the end all be all the thing that I really wanted to do, right? And I think for myself personally, it's like if I was honest with myself and I was like, okay, this is me being completely honest with myself. It's like, okay, every opportunity to host a show that comes along, like the past like 3 opportunities to host a show, I've been like, yeah, that's not something that I want to do, because it's something that I'm learning that like, okay, there's specific things about hosting the show that I enjoyed that I don't enjoy the full breadth of the thing that I would have to do in order to do that show, right? And so it's really kind of creating, like, now that I can be honest with my belief, you know what I mean? I can weed out the things that I believe and don't believe about myself as an artist. Now I can really devote that much more effort to the things that I actually do believe, because I'm clear about that. And so, maybe you're like, man, I really want to get this chapbook out, or I really want to get this book out. And you're thinking like, it's my responsibility, like, just like what Jeff's saying, like, to get this book out. But if somebody's like, have you been working on a book? Have you been doing this? No, not really. I haven't really been doing this. Then maybe the poetry thing, maybe you love poems, but maybe a book is not the thing that you want to do. Maybe like there's a different product, or there's a different thing that you really want to do that's associated with poetry. Which just to say that, yeah, like I think a lot of times it could absolutely be, somebody's being like selfish and they're like, okay, they're just not doing it, or maybe their actual belief is actually something else and they got to sort through that.
I think that speaks also just to the vision that we talked about earlier. These are situations where I think if they close their eyes, everything's blurry. The goal is just, I want to get my book out into the world. What does that even mean? What does that literally even mean? Versus if we're like, I want to get 100 copies of my book into people's hands by July. Well, now I could be like, okay, 100. What do I need to do to get 100? How many people do I need to talk to get one book into someone's hands? So if that number ends up being, okay, I need to talk to 100 people to get one book into someone's hand. So that means, okay, so now, it sounds daunting, but at least now I have numbers. Now it's like, okay, 100 people to get one book sold. I'm trying to sell 100. So that means, okay, I need to, I can reverse engineer that to be like, this is what I need to do. Because then literally, it's literally just math. Just like, okay, I need to reach 1,000 people, or I need to reach 10,000 people.
Yeah.
Okay. That's better than being like, I don't know how many people I need to reach.
For sure.
Anyways, so those are just kind of the big things that are on my mind recently. I think a lot of the events that we do are in that interest of, I think one of the reasons that right now I'm not really interested in having my own book, because I have enough poems to make a book, but I don't have a full length. I have chapbooks, but I don't really have a full length. It's not really something I'm focused on right now, because right now I think the way that I can really create impact with people's lives is the types of things that we do, because the stuff that we do in the city is so different from what other poetry groups are doing. We have big name poets in the city, but they aren't doing the types of things we're doing, in terms of the workshops we have, in terms of like the photo stuff, the video stuff, the like I said, like the poet networking thing we did was like, I never even heard of people doing that before. It's like just like the constant push, even like the open mic show we do, intentionally putting it on a part of town where there's not a lot of poetry stuff going on, in things like that, like I think really trying to think about how can you impact your community in a way that grows people. I really think that's the best contribution that we can give, in that I think poets can give, and that means that we need to think about the relationships that we're fostering with other people, and we devoting ourselves and kind of obsessing over how can I make their experience even better. I think that really is the key.
Yeah, and it's also kind of like the big fish, little fish, big pond kind of theory, like kind of mentality, where it's like, I think that, you know, if you are trying again, it's a good example. Open mics on Wednesdays. There's a lot of open mics on
There's
Wednesdays.
around Columbus doesn't have a lot of like regular shows as much as they used to, but it's wild how many of them, even if they're bi-monthly and then one weekly one,
Land on Wednesday.
there's at least 3 or 4
Right.
on Wednesdays.
And I want to be clear, like, it's not even necessarily say, like, I'm not telling anybody to stop. I'm not telling, like, because I want to be clear. If there were 50 open mics on Wednesdays and all of them were full of different crowds, different parts of town or whatever like that, that would be just as great. You know what I mean? Like, that would be just as good. But I think that, I think a lot of times people are looking to kind of do the thing that they think is you kind of have to do as a poet, and they're not, kind of imagining what other things they could do in service to the poetry community that might be helpful. And one of the things that I really appreciate, and we're gonna do one of these. When is the next photo thing? The photos Thursdays, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, we should. So we'll talk. Me and Joe, we'll talk about that. But like, I think like one of the things that I really enjoy, like that I really like that we do is like the headshots, right? Because there is an aspect of kind of creating a brand for yourself, kind of getting yourself out there that includes kind of getting your face out there. That includes being personable with people and having a representation of yourself that's online, that's clean, clear, has some intention. And I think that it's not something that is a service. It doesn't present itself as a service within the community as much, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like, it's not, a lot of times not being presented within the community. Hey, this is somebody who's invested in getting author photos out there. It's always authors looking into like the photographer community in order to pull somebody in. Mm-hmm. And so I just think it's a really cool facet of Diverses. And I think it kind of shows, I think maybe like, again, the difference in kind of the contours of what we're looking to do, as opposed to, we're not just trying to say like, hey, here's an open mic for you to go to. And this is like, okay, like open mics are an important part of the poetry community. That's why one is being ran. Right. And then also you have, one another good thing about the poetry community, workshops. Okay. Are you working on craft? Those are being ran. Mm-hmm. Okay. Another important thing. Oh, like how do you dissect and break down other people's poems? That's being ran. And then also kind of creating your the business and the brand and the thoughts behind your work, and what your work is driving and what your work is driving to, and who is kind of circling the waters of your work. Oh man, that's being talked about as well. And so it's just like there's all kinds of things that I think that again, which I'll say this, I think craft in a way, because again, to be clear, craft is very important, and craft is incredibly important. And I would say if you had to work on one thing over everything else, I would say craft. And the only reason I would say that is because like there is a chance that even if you're, I would say this, because even if you are not good to me, working on craft might gravitate you to, there's somebody that within your craft. So even if it's just writing the same kind of work and stuff like that you're doing or trying to improve, somebody might happen upon it, if you're out, what have you. But I'm like, if you're like just promoting nothing, like, you're not going to really get too far. But yeah, just to say, even without even kind of trying to put together like, a list or gauge of importance, it's just very, very important. So craft being very, very important is something, but it kind of monopolizes the space around the conversation around the poetry community. So everybody is having the conversation around craft. Everybody is having the conversation about, okay, who are you reading, so that you can, find out how to sharpen your tools. These are all really, really good, important things, but maybe a vacuum exists where it's like, okay, you've got as good, or you've gotten to a point where like, I like my work, and I think Not only do I like my work, I think people will like my work, and I want to get my work out there. Now what? And I'm like, that's the part where I don't like there's not a huge amount of conversations that are happening.
Before we head out, I want to just tell Sierra, always good to see you.
Hey, Sierra.
Hope the little one's okay. She was also in the retreat.
Nice.
I want to connect my poetry haikus with my paintings. I saw you doing some ceramic stuff too, which is cool. And other art pieces. I feel like haikus would be simple. It could have a lot of meaning and short wording. Cool. I would say there's probably even opportunities if I don't know what necessarily the goal is with the project, but there may be opportunities to also get the community involved with this as well. Like for instance, using your haikus as prompts, and then maybe even collecting people's work and then creating like a little anthology that goes with your painting or something like that. Or giving people a painting in the first line and then they finish it. I think there's ways if you want it to be something that's also becoming like a community centerpiece. I think there's a lot of opportunities for that.
Yeah. Also, so I was gonna say because I don't know. You said they were in the retreat. Connect so I'm working on a project. So like one of the things I'm working on, this is kind of like something.
Are we networking right now?
We're networking.
Oh my god.
One of the things I'm working on, and I want to say it on it because like it's building out. But message either diverses or Maddie with the Cam, and like I have an idea for something that I'm working on right now that I think can kind of help bridge that gap.
How you spell Maddie with the Cam?
Matty WITH THECAM.
Okay. No crazy. It's just normal spelling.
No, just yeah. Okay. But yeah, just like hit me up there, and because I have an idea, and there's a larger project that I am working on. But I would love to like either like pick your brain or at least pick your brain. Maybe we could like talk about it or really get you involved with the project because like there's things that are happening.
Guys, this is what it's about.
Yeah.
This is like I know social media gets ragged on a lot. It gives so many opportunities. There's so many opportunities it can do. Anyways, we would love to know your guys' thoughts on our discussion from today. Craft versus, strengthening relationships and things like that. Is there like a proportion? Is there a time when you think it's better to focus on craft? Is there a time where you think it's better to focus on that relationship aspect? Are we overblowing the relationship aspect? How important is that relationship aspect to you? Yeah. What are you doing to deepen your relationships and, develop new relationships with those around you? We would love to hear all those things. With that, thank you as always for your time. Sierra, thanks for hanging with us. River Sticks, if you're still around, thank you as well for coming by earlier. Once more, my name is Jeff.
Wait, hold on. What are we doing this week?
This week, do we have anything crazy going on? This week we have open mic on Friday. So Friday at 7 p.m. doors at Third Way Cafe on the West Side. We'll be doing our poetry open mic.
You should come.
Thursday we have our free author headshots and also poetry recordings. So we started last week recording one poem. So if you like to have one poem recorded of yourself reading it, we can do that as well on Thursday. Wednesday evening, we do Lo-Fi Poet. So if you want to write some poems while listening to some beats, we'll be here. It's about a half hour, starting at 8:30 p.m. through 9 p.m. on Wednesday. This weekend I don't think we have anything for once. We're taking a break.
Getting some sleep.
Yeah, seriously. Gotta try to do that. Once more, my name is Jeff.
My name is Matthias.
Thank you guys for your time. Greatly appreciate you. We will see you next time. Asking, this is your Instagram?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, yes, that is Instagram. Oh no, it's a spike.
Really, if any that was
hang on one sec. We're on a spike.
Oh.
Okay, now we're out of spike. Okay.
If anybody that was in the retreat, honestly, like we got I got an idea, but yeah, just ultimately I really want to build some stuff out with regards to like kind of the visual medium and stuff like that. Hit me up on the IG, but if you're in the retreat, because you're good with Jeff, you're good with me. So like let me, because Well, he's just a great guy. He's a great guy.
Said I wouldn't cry today. All right, guys. Thank you for your time. We will be back next week with another episode of Diverses Live. You guys take care. Have a good day. Have a good night. Good afternoon. Bye.